What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. In the previous video, you seen me put together the cheapest turbo kit that I could build for the super cheap Civic build. In that video, you seen me build a hood exit style exhaust for this thing with the full intentions of being able to loosen up a V-band, flip it around, and connect it to a full 3-inch exhaust. So in today's video, we're gonna build a full 3-inch exhaust from that downpipe out the back of the car. Now, we are still waiting on injectors, but hopefully by the end of today's video, we can at least take this thing around the block. So let's get through the intro and jump right into today's video. So now that we've gotten through the intro, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're working with. So as you guys can see, this is the downpipe that we made in the last video, and it came out pretty good, especially for MIG welding it. And then over here, I've got the stock exhaust that came off this car, and I'm going to be following this thing pretty closely. Obviously, starting out at the turbo, then we'll follow the tunnel back, and we'll have to do a couple 90s to get around the fuel tank, and then snake it through the suspension somewhere back in here. Now, I did go and look through our spare parts bin, and I came up with this 90, which is going to leave us a couple short, so we'll have to make a few up, but we're going to be using some aluminized steel tubing for this project. I picked up this section at our local Napa Auto Parts, and it's going to work out perfectly fine for us. As you guys know, the whole point of this build has been to keep it as simple, cheap, and functional as possible, so we're going to rock with that. So like I said, we are going to have to make up some 90s, which we're going to do utilizing some pie cuts. I know I'm going to need at least 2 more bends, so that's where we're going to start. We'll go ahead, get those cut, weld them up, and then we'll come back up to the front here and work our way back from the turbo. So now that we've got those pie cuts tacked up, I came up to the front here, and we're gonna just start working from the turbo back. I've got the 90 that we found in our scrap pile. I put another scrap piece on the end just to help us visualize, and I cleaned some of the paint off, got the V-band on there, and we're just gonna hold it up to the bottom of our downpipe here, get that to mate nice and flat, and see if this is gonna put us in the ballpark. So I'd like to keep it right in here in this tucked portion of the oil pan, so that we don't have to worry too much about ground clearance. And this looks like it's gonna work out pretty decent for us. We'll grab the welder and get this V-band tacked up. So after being tacked up, that's where everything lands. I've got this scrap piece here. We're not gonna be using slip joints, so I need a piece without that. But just to eyeball it here, it actually looks like it's gonna run in a really good spot for us, nice and close to the oil pan, but not quite touching. So the next thing we've gotta do is take some measurements so that we can run a piece from here all the way back to our next bend. But we're gonna have to be careful when we start mocking that up, because we've got the shift linkage and everything in that tunnel, and going to a 3-inch pipe, it might get kind of tight. So I'm gonna start taking some measurements. We'll grab another length and start mocking that one up too. So the next step would be to make a piece that's gonna come from that one under the oil pan that we just got done making. And we've got to run it all the way back by here, by the shift linkage, up to about where this heat shield is by the fuel tank. And then we'll take some of our pie cuts that we made and place them up in here like so that we can route it around this fuel tank. We'll put our other one on the other side to shoot it back towards the back of the car once again. But my biggest worry is coming by this shift linkage with the 3-inch pipe. So that's something we might have to tackle. But before we worry about that, I took a measurement, it's 87 inches, so let's go ahead and cut ourselves a piece. So I've got the straight section mocked up here, got a ratchet strap holding it here and the floor jack back there. It lines up pretty decent, I'm pretty happy with it, but I should have gone a little bit longer with my pie cuts to bring it down away from the pan a little bit more. It's gonna clear, but it's gonna be close. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the welder set up. We'll get this tacked in a few spots so that we can start working on the bends that we need for the back of the car. Now that we got this one tacked in place, we can go ahead and make another piece to go to our other 90 that's going to go over here. We need one that's 11 inches, so let's go ahead and cut that so we can get it tacked.
I literally can't believe that we drove
Alright guys, so it is the next day. I ended up walking away from this thing last night. Got a little bit frustrated because the car's so low and trying to wheel around with the creeper and all the welding cables in my way and only having two hands got a little bit frustrating when trying to mock this thing up. So I came down today and got it a little bit higher up in the air. We got some blocks under the jack stands. I did shake it real good. It's not going anywhere, and I do have a safety jack in the back and 4 jack stands. But last night before we called it quits, we went ahead and welded up the 90. So we've got our first 90 here welded up solid, and then I welded the V-bands onto both. So that stuff is all welded up and finish welded. So now we can move to the back. I did go ahead and tack on our first 90 to start working us around the fuel tank. So once we get this thing up and in place, that's where we're gonna pick up today. We'll start building from there, go around the tank, and then we'll have to start working our way through the suspension. So we've got our next piece made here. We can go ahead and get this one lined up, and then we can get ready to start tacking this one in place too. So as you guys just seen, I went ahead and finish welded this out. We had everything tacked up underneath the car, but I wanted to get it welded and then we can start working from there. We're about where the rear axle would be, where that pipe is. We had to jog it up a little bit, and we're gonna get this thing back on the car so that we can start working on making a tip and getting everything angled out the back the way we want it. So let's get this thing slid back under there so we can start making some hangers and get the last section made. So as you guys seen, we got everything finish welded up to about there. So I went ahead and threw it back on, and now we're back here working on a tailpipe situation. I'm not running a muffler back here, so I'm just trying to make the pipe come out kind of where it was. Not gonna make it absolutely perfect, but I've got it pretty close. So it's gonna come out something kind of like that right there, which I can deal with. So let's go ahead, get the welder out and weld this thing up. I went ahead and eyeballed an angle cut on there just with the die grinder, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I like the placement of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that tacked up so that we can get the exhaust back off one more time so that we can finish weld everything. So as you guys just seen, we got this thing rolled out here for the first time with the full exhaust and the turbo system on it. Sadly, we are still waiting on the injectors. If you've seen the last video, you know the debacle with the injectors that we're dealing with, but we're waiting for those to show up. But we can still fire it up with the stock injectors that are in it, and we might even take it down the road. But the exhaust came out really good. I'll get a light so I can show you guys the ground clearance on it. But check out the tip that just came in for it. Thing looks perfect, fits the car perfectly. But no, I'm just kidding. We got the 3-inch, like I said before. It actually came out really good. I'm super happy with the placement on it. We used that slip fit joint almost as a tip, and it actually fits the car super good. We've got it sticking out a little bit past the bumper so that it doesn't soot up the back bumper or melt it if we decide to bounce this thing on a 2-step. But for what we did with it and how cheap we made this exhaust cost me next to nothing. So I'm super happy with how it came out. Did take a little bit of time because of all the pie cuts and doing it custom and just trying to use what we had laying around here. But with all things considered, I think it came out super good. So let's go ahead, grab the keys to this thing, fire it up, and see what it sounds like. While we've got this thing outside and on the ground quick, I just wanted to show you guys our ground clearance situation. It's actually not bad. Back here, it's a little bit lower than I wanted, but I was trying to go with the stock routing. So it actually came out pretty decent. We've got enough ground clearance for what we're gonna do. There's gonna be other things that would hit, and the exhaust has a little bit of flex to it. At some time, we might add a flex bellow up at the front there so that if this does bounce around a little bit, not all the stress is on our downpipe and turbo, which would be the proper way to do it. I just didn't have one here, and like you guys know, we're trying to keep this build as cheap and simple as possible, just like anybody could do in their garage, and it came out pretty good. So let's take a look at the back there and see how it goes through the control arm. That's what we've got for the tailpipe section here. We use that slip joint, which actually, from here it looks kind of funny, but from up, standing up, it actually looks pretty sweet. And then we just went through the control arm, stock routing, and it's got plenty of clearance. This car does not move much in the back, so I think we're gonna be perfectly fine back here. So now that we've checked this thing out, let's go ahead and start it up, see what it sounds like. Finally gonna go ahead and do our first start with the full exhaust. Got the lights on so that we can see our oil pressure gauge down here, because if you guys seen the last video, you know that that's something that we're keeping an eye on for a couple of reasons. So let's go ahead and start this thing up. Sounds pretty good. Definitely a little quieter with the full exhaust. Oil pressure's coming right up. Got plenty of oil pressure, so that's a good sign. Idling a little rough, but as you guys know, we've got a big fuel pump, got the turbo now, and we haven't tuned on this thing at all. Honda down there on the floor. Let's let it warm up, see how it sounds, and maybe take it down the street. Thing sounds really good, especially if you guys seen the last video with what was in the oil on this thing. It sounds perfectly healthy, so keeping a close eye on that. Oil pressure still looks good. It actually sounds really good with that exhaust on it. Not sure how it's coming across in video, but it sounds really good. Let it warm up here for a minute, and maybe we'll try taking it down the street. Sadly, we can't really beat on it because it's not tuned or anything yet. But I'm gonna get my little Honda app open just so we can keep an eye on things. And we'll take it down the road and just see how it sounds for now. Exhaust rattles, creaks, clanks. That's a huge plus. I can definitely smell something cooking off. This is the first time we've taken it down the road at all since we did the turbo and everything, so pull over up here in a second real quick and just pop the hood. Make sure everything seems good.
Oil pressure drop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's normal.
Yeah, when it gets warm, it will.
Gotcha.
Alright guys, so far everything's looking good. Oil pressure came down a little bit at idle when it's warm, but that's normal as it gets hot. There's a pound of boost. It made its first boost. You want to show down? Let's see if that thing is first pound of boost, guys. So it is making boost. I can't wait till we get a tune on this thing. Let Henry play around with it a little bit, get it on the dyno, and have some fun with it. I'm really curious to see what we can do with this thing for how budget we built it. Should turn out to be a pretty fun, very affordable little car. Still have a few little things we need to work out, but all in all, this thing should turn out pretty sweet. That's the other thing too. I gotta see what gate is in here, how much pressure it's gonna make on this gate. I put a lighter one in it because we are gonna run a boost controller so we can do boost by gear and stuff. But we'll just have to see what it makes first and then adjust from there. I can't believe how good it's actually running for not even having anything changed as far as the tune goes. But let's head back to the house and give this thing a once over. As you guys seen, we were finally able to take this thing around the block, and I couldn't be happier. I was kind of worried that this little thing was not going to want to spool that turbo, but as you've seen, even just going around the block, as soon as I started to lay into it, even at a very low RPM, this thing started making upwards of 4 pounds of boost, so I had to let out, because as you guys know, we are still waiting on our injectors and we haven't done any tuning on this thing yet. So I couldn't be happier, and the exhaust came out phenomenal. I'm not sure which one you guys prefer. Here's a clip with the hood exit, a little bit of idle, and some revs. And I'm not sure which one I prefer yet. I do like the full exhaust, but the hood stack is kind of cool too. I've just never been a hood stack kind of person. And then here's a clip with it running with the full exhaust. Personally, I kind of like the full exhaust because when you close the hood, you would have no idea that this little grandma car has a turbo, and it sounds pretty decent in my opinion. So you guys make sure to let me know down in the comments which one you prefer. As always, I appreciate you for checking out today's video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell. And check us out on all of our other social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, and Bought to Build Official on Instagram. And we will catch you on the next one.